We'll stand for questions.
Senator Harrington, just as you were speaking in social media, I heard from a police officer who said rank-and-file cops support it. It's just administration that's against it.
I disagree. Most of the rank-and-file cops that I've talked to are very concerned about the officers' safety consequences of this bill.
How about the governor? He's probably the backstop on this. Do you have assurances from him? He didn't, clearly take this down when asked about it.
I have not talked to the governor about this bill, and although I have heard from others that say that he is opposed to the bill, but I have not talked to him personally.
Senator, what is the experience in other states? The sponsors of the bill say this has not been a problem.
I've heard from other states that have said that, in fact, there have been consequences of folks being shot really needlessly when the chance to retreat or the threat was very, very minimal.
And police officers, have they been shot also?
There have been a number of cases where officers have been shot on the threshold, and I think Chief Dolan had some experience, or had some experience with that himself.
I would add, to what John said. We've had a number of officers shot at the point of entry, myself included. I'm sure other departments have had the same. But you've had a number of officers killed this year in the United States who were serving warrants at the threshold point of entry. It is a very dangerous place to be, and it is something that we need to do on a daily basis. We have to do that every single day. And to lessen the burden of responsibility on the people with those guns is going to just make it that much more dangerous, and people are going to be more willing and more free to take those shots at people that are behind that door.
You're concerned about people in gangs using this law to their advantage if it were passed?
Mr. Basham, I think, has an answer for that.
That's a good point to make, because this law, if it's enacted, would apply equally to criminals as it would apply to any citizen in our state. And if there's a criminal involved in a confrontation with another criminal, such as gang members, confrontations which occur all the time, if those persons have a reasonable fear of substantial harm or death, they have a right to use deadly force. We could not prosecute those gang members for shooting at each other if this law is enacted. That's wrong, and it shouldn't happen.
What about, I know in Minneapolis right now there's been a rash of robberies in the uptown area, and a gentleman, I think just recently, was attacked and shot his gun and dispersed the situation. So if somebody says, here's a good example of a situation where that gun shot to stop this robbery, and I'm just asking that question.
Well, a lot of assumptions there, but I'll tell you one thing, that this individual fired 3 rounds that weren't stopped by gravity in my residential area. Every one of them was stopped by a house. Do you want to live in that neighborhood where that's going on? I'm glad it worked out well for that individual. We have one side of that story. We don't know what the full situation is. There's a lot of assumptions, but there is no assumption about what happened with those 3 rounds. That's not a safe situation.
And not a deterrent.
It's not a deterrent.
Senator Harrington, do you know what the schedule of this bill is? I missed the very beginning. Is it coming up today? Is it coming up in the next few days?
My understanding of this bill was referred to the Rules Committee and has now been referred to the Finance Committee, because there's a finance note in there. So I do not know when it will what will happen in finance, or if it passes out of finance, when it would go to the floor.
You've also made a number of comments about the budget. Are you concerned that you're talking about this instead of the budget?
I think that really goes without saying that with less than 2 weeks left to the session, we are talking about a bill that, frankly, is in search of a problem, rather than the problem that looms in front of us with a $5 billion hole that needs to be patched. So I am absolutely concerned that we're spending an inordinate amount of time on what some would refer to as a social agenda, when the financial future and the services to the state of Minnesota, which July 1st is going to come rapidly after the end of session, are definitely in jeopardy if we do not act on the budget and act on it quickly.
Senator, some of your colleagues here have mentioned either negotiations or discussions that might take place or should have taken place with this bill moving through committee process. I mean, do you have any amendments or changes you'd like to see that might make it more acceptable, or is this just kind of a broad broadly misguided piece of legislation?
I would argue that it's a broadly misguided piece of legislation and should just be pulled.
Delete all.
Yeah, the delete all amendment would appropriately be applied here. We have a law that already works. Adding another law that weakens the current existing law doesn't make any sense. And then to add additional responsibilities to an overly strapped Health and Human Services Department also makes no sense at all. Thank you very much.